We're ready to go? Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our March 19th, 2024 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District meeting. And our first order of business is to call the meeting to order and pledge of allegiance. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item is to see if anybody from the public has a comment that they want to address the Board of Managers on an item that's not on the agenda or the consent agenda. If you are here for that, please come forward. And not seeing anybody, so we're going to move ahead to the approval of the agenda. I don't believe there's any additions, or wait, there is one on the consent agenda that needs to be removed. That's item 6.5.
That's correct.
That needs to be removed from the agenda. Completely, yeah. Item 6.5.
Permit application 2401.
Yep. Permit application, that's not ready to go forward yet. Okay, with that, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
It's moved by Manager Tofinelli. Second by Manager Burnett. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so next we're going to go old and new business, and we're going to start with programs and projects.
All right, thank you. To begin our programs discussion here, we'll jump back into lake level graphing. Prior Lake is on the decline again. So as of today, 898.6. It's pretty low. I guess we were expecting some water this winter, but that never showed up. Spring Lake, on the other hand, is at 910.1. And I would consider that to be almost normal, on the low side of normal. So Spring Lake gets their water first from the upper watershed. Spring Lake needs to fill up right around 910.4 or 5, and then it starts to discharge into upper Prior Lake. So until it reaches another about half foot, Prior Lake is not going to receive water from spring. Feels like we were just talking about ice over just a couple months ago. So ice out occurred rapidly on March 3rd, where our Tier 1 lakes, Upper Prior, Lower, Fish, and Spring, all iced out on the 3rd. And if you're wondering, that was 56 days between ice on and ice off on Upper Prior Lake. And way off on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see we were, breaking records this year. And that goes for most of the state, much of the state, I should say. The monitoring and research changed gears from winter data analysis to data collection. We installed lake and stream sensors. Our stream flows are still very low. We had ice damage on our Fish Lake water level logger well. And then Pike Lake, we're running into issues with the water levels being so low that we are working on installing new wells and lengthening the cables on our sensors. And we have, Danielle has begun camp coordination with our volunteer citizen-assisted monitoring program, Lake Volunteers. In our operations department, we are dewinterizing and resuming treatment operations tomorrow on our ferric chloride water treatment system. And we have begun coordination for our 2024 AIS monitoring and treatments. Carp management has sort of been highs and lows this winter with the lack of ice. So this month, Zach was monitoring open water carp aggregations in Spring Lake. We had a strong grouping in the traditional seine hall. We coordinated with commercial netters. This was yesterday, and CARP did not cooperate. There was 10 out of 12 tags in this area, and this was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of last week, and by the time we could organize netters and permits, we get out there on Monday morning, and CARP were already feeling anxious to move, and so throughout the morning they dispersed. So unfortunately our big haul didn't happen, but we still have quite a bit of time until that allows us to do these commercial removals up until the end of April. So we're hopeful that CARP will come back together and we can take them out on Spring Lake. We also presented CARP management, the whole program, to the Coalition of Northern Dakota Cities. This is a public works group within the South Metro, and they found our CARP program very interesting.
Okay, I'll be relatively brief today. Just give some updates on some projects that have ongoing work happening in the last month. We've been talking for several months on the development of the swamp iron enhanced sand filter. We're in easement drafting with the landowner currently. That negotiation was approved by the board in January. I would anticipate it would be complete by May if all goes according to plan. And this could be a project we could potentially use WBIF, watershed-based implementation funds, to implement or go to final design in this year and next year. So that project's looking good. I've also been working with Danielle, submitting 2 grant applications that are due at the end of March and April. Those are essentially Plan B and C for funding the pipelining of the Prior Lake outlet pipe. That would be, those fundings are announced this spring and then next summer. So depending on what we are successful, we may have a different timeline, but our ideal schedule would be to either obtain the bonding funds or the MPCA grant this spring and construct the pipelining this winter 2024-2025. We're all ready on our side, so just getting the suitcases of money to help us do that quickly under drought conditions. Another area that we've had some progress in this last month is looking at flood storage projects. So a different element where the Prior Lake outlet pipe helps us get water out fast in times of flood. These projects would help slow down water reaching our big lakes. So kind of stretch out that peak and make it a little bit more manageable. The board had prioritized projects number 1, 5, and 6 on this map in our last discussions. Staff has confirmed through conversations with these landowners that right now at this time we do not have interested landowners with those projects due to various elements. The land use, they need the land right now, not wanting to work with the district on a project like this, or just waiting for development. So we'll likely need to wait until the landscape of the area changes, how those property owners are using their land to move forward on those, and staff will bring forward some recommendations on next steps or next places to look at a future meeting. So we keep flood storage projects moving. Any questions on those?
Any questions from board members? I just had one. Where's Area 1 again? Couldn't see it on the map. It's
Yeah, the numbers are small. Area
Yeah.
1 is Geis wetland. So
Ice wetland. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Was
anything?
that the whole report?
Yeah, I think so.
Was it?
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
My question is, we're redoing the website. Will we have that grand opening as part of a meeting like this? So we can show them the new website, how it works, what information's in there, stuff like that?
Manager Boyles, that's a good suggestion. And so When we're at that point in time, we certainly can kind of introduce, possibly as programs and projects, kind of an overview, an introduction to the updated and refreshed website. But we got a lot of populating to do yet.
Oh, yeah,
before
I'm sure.
we're ready to go.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're done with programs, or no, Christian, you have a comment?
Yes, please. So my question has to do with the iron clad system operations. And when I read your report in here, it says start system in manual mode, replace failed data logger and sensors, program new data logger. And so my question is, are we ready to start it up as is, and will it function, and what's the timeline in these projects?
Manager Morkenberg. Yes, we are able to start it in its current state. We will be keeping quite a closer eye on how it's operating. We will be operating the pump as in a manual state, which means that we need to go there and push buttons on it to change its pumping rate. So we will be looking over with our contractors tomorrow some of the components of startup and their functionality to confirm replacement, and just ask them overall questions on documenting the startup process in a little more detailed manner. There is barely any flow at the County Ditch 13 weir right now, so that's going to limit some of our capacity to evaluate the effectiveness. So we'll wait for rain and flows to continue the project. So, and then lastly, I am working with the equipment contractor on getting the equipment to work all together, programmed to operate to the conditions that we had mentioned in the plan, to have that be dosed, have it be automated, more or less a smart system.
Good, thank you. So you feel it's ready to function here, like we'll hopefully get snow this weekend here and so on here, so it's ready to function and can start extracting the phosphorus when the flow picks up. And then we'll work on get it optimized. And you have the funding, I believe, for replacing those parts now. So these are part of the immediate resolution, and then we have the working on the more long-term resolution as well, I think you discussed last time.
Correct. Yep. The equipment has been quoted and approved. That quote and invoice will come through likely next month. Okay. And then shortly after, we'll begin installing that equipment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff.
Manager Boyles, you have another question?
I'm sorry, a question I forgot. You said that our plans for the PLOC are 95% done. Who cares? Who does care, honestly?
Yeah, great question, Manager Boyles. All of the grant applications we've submitted so far have asked, what are the assurances? How can you demonstrate that your organization is capable and ready to implement this project? So we can say, well, we invested in the plans, we have the plans and specs here, we're ready to go, except for we need the money to hire the contractor.
And just to exhaust the entire subject, we've had the opportunity to have both the House Committee and Senate Committee down here in these parts. And can you share with folks what you did and what it was intended to do? It was very innovative, and I don't think few people know about it.
Yep, I'd be happy to. We had a great staff collaborative effort to make, had our intent at our go at making something memorable for House and Senate bonding tour representatives. So both House and Senate had their own bonding tour. They toured around the state, seeing many, many presentations. We tried to make our presentation memorable by making it a very important PIPE, VIP section of the tour. There was a red carpet, there was all access passes with more information, and some sparkling cider. So we received really positive feedback, and it was a great collaborative staff effort with almost everyone on the team. So I think we left a good impression.
Terrific, thank you.
And there probably is a brochure on our website. Maybe there is one or not, but you guys did present a really nice brochure of the project. So if it's not on the website, it probably should be.
Manager Loney, we will post that brochure to the district's website.
Yep, it has all the good information. Thank you, guys. Are we done now with programs? I just want to make sure. I jumped the gun there a
Sorry.
little bit. Frank, you got any more? You done? Okay. All right. Well, with that, we're going to go to item 4.2, which is approval of new CAC member Ryan Murr. And Danielle, you're going to present this.
Yes, Manager Loney. The CAC, Citizen Advisory Committee, new member committee recommends that the board approve Ryan Murr's membership to the Citizen Advisory Committee based on his commitment to and interest in sustainability and conservation topics. This is demonstrated by his membership and leadership in multiple environmental clubs and committees over the years, including in school and in work, as well as his understanding of different water resource issues. And Ryan's welcome to come up to the podium and introduce himself to the board as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we could have him speak right now. That'd be good. And then, welcome, Ryan. The green light comes on, then you're able to speak.
There we go. Well, good evening, board. Good evening, staff of the district on hand. I want to first thank you with the opportunity to share a little bit more about myself with you tonight and my interest in the CAC committee. So I did graduate college at University of River Falls, Wisconsin, where I majored in animal science with a minor in sustainable agriculture. I've always been passionate about how we use the land and the effects it has, both from an economic standpoint and from an environmental perspective. So I kind of paired the two together through my studies, and which led me to my current employer, where I work with processing vegetables on a large scale. There I've had the opportunity to be on an environmental committee where we work on managing our wastewater discharges and treatments, as well as our maintaining permit requirements. My predominant focus on that committee is making sure that we meet our recyclability goals and our efforts, and that we're actually recycling with credible vendors. And when I was in school, I was also the president of our resource management club, which focused heavily on educating other college students on resources and how we use them and conserve them within our society. And we also worked with the local communities to protect and conserve those resources around us. Chiefly among them, we partnered with the Kinnickinnic River Valley Land Trust to help preserve the headwaters of the Kinnickinnic River that is located within the River Falls area.
Wow, sounds like a nice resume. Any questions for Ryan from the board, or?
No, I wanted to welcome you to the CAC, and it's a very good organization, and you get a chance to learn a lot and influence us in our planning process and what we do. I encourage you to really study hard in the beginning and really get to know what is it the watershed district is working with, so you understand it's like what are our goals, and then try and work within those frames to come up with new and wonderful ideas and give us feedback. So, but I will just tell you, it's a lot of work, but you have the background to do it and the passion to do it. So, good luck and welcome.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Manager Boyles.
You may have covered this and I missed it, but what did you find most intriguing that you learned in the CAC interview? What drew you to, I'll take the next step?
What drew me? So I grew up, I was born and raised here in Prior Lake. I've spent my entire 25 years living in this area, except for my short stints away at school. So I've always been passionate about our watershed and our water resources, growing up on the lakes, growing up fishing, growing up swimming, growing up doing water sports. So I wanted to be involved and be an active citizen within, the boards that help maintain that resource for future generations. And one of the things that I really was attracted to and was encouraged when I was speaking with, Director Matt, was how we address invasive species. Invasive species, can disrupt entire ecosystems and cause cascading effects, whether it be through milfoil or through carp, and just how we are working to remedy those issues within our watersheds and our ecosystems to make sure that they remain healthy and viable for future generations.
Another question, Frank?
Looking ahead, say 3 years, might you be interested in becoming a manager on this board? And it doesn't matter, in terms of CAC, but just curiosity.
If the opportunity were to present itself, I'd be more than interested to continue to grow with organizations and provide input and help, improve the watershed board and be a part of the missions that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Ryan. Sounds like you have Prior Lake in your blood, since you've been born
I
and
like
raised
that.
there.
Second generation.
Very good to have one of our locals here to get on the CAC. So I'm looking for a motion to
So
approve
moved.
the appointment of Ryan Murr to the District Citizen Advisory Committee.
Jumped on that.
So moved. And seconded? Manager Morkenberg? Move as made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Welcome, Ryan. You're approved. Thank you. Thank you for your volunteerism. Okay. Next, we're going to go with an aquatic plant survey presentation. Mr. Anderson, are you going to start this off? And then we're going to have a presentation by Mr. McComas.
Here we go. All right. Yes, Steve McComas with Blue Water Science and his son Connor McComas has been doing lake aquatic vegetation surveys, delineations, treatment assessments for the district for many, many years. Steve's been integral in allowing us to collect and utilize these vegetation data sets in grant reporting, treatment effectiveness, and overall lake health monitoring. Steve McComas monitored several lakes this summer for diversity, and those are point intercept surveys, as well as doing treatment delineations and treatment analysis. So, Steve, I welcome you to join us with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks, Jess. It's always a pleasure to be and present here at the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board. So I was going to go over kind of some of our aquatic plant efforts that we did last year, both surveys and kind of results, and what did we find. Here are the lake locations. We looked at 5 lakes last year, and from that, the first few lakes, Prior Spring and Fish, we did curly-leaf pondweed delineations first, and then after that, we assessed that curly-leaf pondweed, and at the same time, we were looking at for Eurasian water milfoil, and then we also did a couple of point intercept surveys. So when we do these curly-leaf delineations, this is what kind of curly-leaf looks like early in the year, like right about now. It's a little bit ahead of schedule because we had an early ice out, but you can see that the curly-leaf is fairly sparse right there. So we're collecting curly-leaf data and predicting what it will do in another 5-6 weeks. And so we have a little system set up that's pretty conventional throughout the whole state. And you get 3 or 4 stems on a rake. That's probably going to be and produce a dense bed of curly-leaf in another 5 or 6 weeks. So that's what we do. If we have 1 stem or less, then we're not even going to treat that. We'll note it, but not treat it. So here's Spring Lake. And when we did our assessment here, we did it in May, you can see we had a couple areas totaling about 8.82 acres that were treated with herbicides. So we delineated the whole entire lake, and these are the two sites that had treatable and potential heavy growth of curlyleaf pondweed. So that was treated. When we came back in June, we did a whole lake point intercept survey as part of a DNR requirement. And along the same lines, whenever we do that point intercept survey, we're also looking at areas in between those points to see if we can't pick up curlyleaf. So here we're doing a meander survey plus a point intercept survey. And for the most part, we can see that the treatment was fairly effective, in fact, very effective, although we did find a few other sites of curlyleaf in Spring Lake, but it was all green dots, and that's a light growth. So we avoided any heavy growth of curlyleaf pondweed in Spring Lake in 2023. Here was a Spring Lake photo from 2000 when it was not treated at that point and also very heavy growth. So that's what heavy growth can look like in Spring Lake. When we started the program then in 2002, for 5 years, we looked at one area of harvesting, kind of doing an experiment, and then an area of herbicide treatments. So we did that for about 4 or 5 years and found that herbicide applications were more cost effective and also had better control. So then the program was going to switch over to herbicide applications in the future. However, from 2007 through 2015, there wasn't enough curlyleaf to treat. It started to show up again in 2016, and you can see the areas that have been treated. We put all those years of herbicide areas that were treated for curlyleaf on the map. You can see it's pretty consistent in those areas. There's a area down in that southwest corner that's popped up, but otherwise that's what it looks like. So the good news is that curlyleaf is not taking over the lake. And here's just a table and a summary going back to 2000, where we show years of treatment or harvesting in yellow and years of no treatment, green or gray. And last year we ended up with 6.88 acres, kind of a reasonable amount for a big lake like Spring Lake. Certainly an improvement over conditions in the past. We also have been looking at Eurasian water milfoil, EWM, in Spring Lake. When it first came into the lake in 2021, here are some areas that were treated and also the areas that we observed milfoil in 2021. Since then, we've been tracking tracking milfoil. Here's milfoil in 2022, a few more acres, treated about 14 acres there, and actually did a couple of treatments. And in 2023, when we were out in June, that map on the left, we didn't find any Eurasian milfoil in June, and we did do another point intercept in August, and in that point intercept survey, we looked at the meander points as well as the point intercept points, and we just found light growth of milfoil. When we have green dots, that typically represents only a few stems coming up and in a non-nuisance condition and what would be considered to be light growth. So we recommended no treatment at this point, and we'll see now what happens as we go into 2024. There's always a question. Milfoil is so variable from year to year, but by August, with the light growth, there wasn't much need to really treat milfoil at that point. Prior Lake, we did a curlyleaf pondweed delineation going around the entire lake, lower and upper Prior, and we did find some potential sites of nuisance curlyleaf growth, but they were all within 150 feet of shore. And typically that area from the shoreline out to 150 feet is kind of the riparian owner's responsibility, and they can treat or not treat themselves. And the watershed district, if we were to treat, typically has been past 150 feet, which is considered to be open water. We didn't see any open water areas that really needed treatment, so we did not recommend any curly-leaf treatment in the prior lakes in 2023. So we went back later, though, in June to assess to see how it worked. You can see that we did have some curly-leaf growth from May into June, but it was mostly within that 150 feet. So we delineate the whole lake for the most part, the shallow water as well as the deeper water. And there are some red dots in there, but those were pretty much gone then a couple weeks later. So we did have some areas of heavy curly-leaf growth, but closer for the most part to shore than open water. Here's a hotspot map, so to speak, of areas that have been treated. You can see that Mud Lake up there, or up in Upper Pryor, the Mud Bay, we didn't find any curly-leaf in 2023. That has been a hot spot in the area, or in years past. So curly-leaf last year just didn't show up in that bay and was not treated. Here is kind of a long-term summary, going back to 2009, a few years no treatment, 4 or 5 years with treatment, took a year off in 2018, and in 2023, we didn't have any treatment as well. That's pretty typical for curly-leaf, variable from year to year. We also checked for milfoil as we were going around on those meander points. There was some milfoil, mostly lake growth, and in shallow water. You see a few red dots there. That would be where milfoil is probably hitting the surface, but in patches and in small beds. So by June, there was some milfoil coming into and growing in Prior Lake. We also did the same thing with this meander survey for Fish Lake in April. You can see there's a few red dots, but mostly green dots, and they're dispersed. So rather than treating just little patches here and there, we recommended no treatment necessary in Fish Lake. And then we did go back and look later in May, and what we found is that a little bit of curly-leaf, but at light growth. Those green dots are light growth. So curly-leaf in Fish Lake, fortunately, has not really been a big nuisance factor for a number of years. Well, then I'll talk a little bit about some of the point intercept plant surveys that we did in 2023. Well, a couple anyway, because when we looked at Sutton Lake, for the second year in a row, we just didn't have enough water to float a boat. There's about 1 to 2 feet of muck as well, so even if we were to walk a boat, we were walking through the muck, and it's a pretty big lake. So we did a lot of visual, took a lot of pictures, but we did not get our typical point intercept survey for the second year in a row. And you can see here what's dominant in that lake is coontail, some water lilies, and then a lot of duckweed. So that is a typical plant community. If we were to get around to do an entire point intercept survey, those would be the plants that would dominate. And the last time we did a point intercept survey, when we had 2 or 3 feet of water, that's what we found as well. So there is some drone coverage, and that would also add to. We're still working on this report. So we want to look at our aerial photos that we have and put together a kind of a plant community structure report for Sutton Lake. We also did a point intercept survey in Upper Pryor. We kind of alternate. One year we'll do Lower Pryor, the next year Upper Pryor. Here's the plant coverage for Upper Pryor. Plant coverage in Upper Pryor is starting to increase a little bit. We had 6 species of plants, and coontail was the dominant plant. And you can see here the green dots, yellow dots, a couple red dots. Those are the areas where plants were found. How does this compare to previous years? We'll get to that in a second. Here is the milfoil in Upper Pryor. So this is by August. So even though we had some milfoil earlier in June, by August, it had not really grown to nuisance or heavy growth conditions. It was mostly late growth, fairly well distributed, but at light growth, and also mixed in with the other native plants. in the lake. Here's kind of a summary of point intercept surveys going back to 2015. You can see about every 2 to 3 years we'll do a point intercept survey. The number of species has kind of centered around 6 species or so. 2021 we had a few more species, but what is interesting there is that the coverage of aquatic plants has been increasing in Upper Pryor. It's at 143 acres in 2023, so that's the highest it's been in those last 8 years. Also, the maximum depth of plant growth is down now to 13 feet. So that's a good sign. We can get a good aquatic plant coverage. We can get good water clarity as well. Kind of a rule of thumb, we're looking at about 40% has been what's been used in other lakes and other literature reports. Our percentage coverage is right at 37%, very close to 40%, and also the highest percent coverage that we've had since we've been doing these point intercept surveys. So that seems to be going, well, it certainly is going in the right direction. We also did this point intercept survey in August on Spring Lake. Here's our second point intercept survey. There was a lot of native plant growth. These red dots here that you see in the lake, those are native plants. And believe it or not, coontail is certainly present, but it's a nice pondweed that is a dominant plant, and that's clasping leaf pondweed. And that is a Potamogeton species, very good for fish habitat, and also has good water quality impacts from helping keep the water clear. And we had plants growing down to 12 feet, and we had 17 different species, and that's one of the highest species counts we've had. They call it species richness, and that's the highest species richness reading that we've had since we've been doing these point intercept surveys. Here's just kind of an overview of some of the previous point intercept surveys. Coverage has been ranging from a low of about 21% in 2018. We had a little bit higher coverages since then, and in 2023 we had a 31% coverage. That's an improvement over 2022 and 2019, and almost as good as 2021, which is probably an alum year. But look at the abundance of aquatic plants in Spring Lake is a little bit higher in 2023 than it has been previously. Here's a kind of a summary then of our plant growth. It's always kind of, the depth of plants growing is an indicator of water clarity. And we had, again, plants growing out to 12 feet, which matches that 2021 number, and the spring and the coverage is right around 31% as well. So an improvement over 2022, not quite as good as 2021, but overall better than previous point intercept surveys. Here is a graph of all our plant species list and numbers going back to 1948. So the DNR used to do they'd generate plant lists whenever they were doing fish surveys. So we have some records going back to 1948. And from a low of about 5 or 6 species, we're now up to 17 different species. That's a good ecological distribution and indicator of sometimes fairly good water quality. Well, in summary, we have curlyleaf growth is certainly variable from year to year. This year will be interesting because we had a season of a short ice season, 56 days, like Jeff mentioned, and it was a late ice on, so curlyleaf can grow right up to the ice comes on. Then it kind of inhibits growth after that. It's alive, curlyleaf is alive, but not actively growing. But as soon as the ice goes off, curlyleaf then picks up again because the light penetration is so much better. So we're going to have, we have an earlier start to curlyleaf pondweed in all our lakes. And what I would expect to happen is it's not necessarily going to be more abundant, but we'll have an extended growth season. So we're getting growth right now, and it'll go probably into June as far as we can tell or predict, and we'll kind of see how that goes. We'll be out starting to delineate in a week or so, as soon as the snow melts, because apparently we're getting a big old snow blast here in the next few days. But once the snow melts, we'll be back out there and starting our curly leaf delineations. Curly leaf has been light to moderate in Fish Lake. Milfoil has starting to spread a little bit more in the Prior Lakes, but by the end of the summer, sometimes it's almost like it's been burned out in the last couple of years because of the heat, and so it's not necessarily hitting the surface, matting, and real abundant. It's present, has a pretty good distribution, but relatively light growth. So Spring Lake, I think the good news there is, holy cow, we got as many species as we've ever recorded in that lake, so let's keep that going. And with that, do we have time for questions or two? Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. McComas. I just saw, I think on TV not too long ago, about an article about curly leaf pond weed being a really big year this year. Maybe, I don't know if it's, like you said, the ice out has maybe the biggest effect, or nothing with the drought or anything like that.
Right. Well, we have a whole collision of factors here. One is, late ice on, early ice off, so it's starting to grow right now. The lake levels that are down about a foot gives us even better light penetration for more sprouting. But curly leaf seems to have kind of a growing period, a little bit like it's acting like an annual. Corn has an 80-day growth period. So if corn starts growing, in March, it's going to end in 80 days. If it starts growing and planted in May, it's going to end, it'll go that 80 days. So curly leaf seems to have something like that as well. It has a life cycle of about 80 to 90 days. So if it started early, maybe it'll even die back a little bit earlier as well. But right now, the DNR is saying they would like to have all plants treated by the end of April, and that might be extended a bit. So that'll put the onus on the applicators as well. They'll be scrambling. And the reason for that earlier than usual cutoff is because the native plants are going to start growing as well with the warmer temperatures and the warmer water. And because we're using contact herbicides to kill curly leaf, if the native plants are up, we're going to start dinging them as well. So these contact herbicides can be somewhat selective when curly leaf is the dominant plant and we're applying those herbicides before the native plants come in. So this is a little bit new territory. This has been a little bit of an exceptional year, but Mother Nature also has a way of evening things out. So we're going to be below normal temperatures for the next 10, 12 days. That's going to slow up the growth a little bit. And, by the middle of the summer, we're probably going to be just about average or about normal. Yes, question?
Yes, Steve McComas, thank you so much for the outstanding work you do. And it's always inspiring. And I still remember back on when we patrolled Upper Prior Lake, Lower Prior Lake, and Spring Lake.
Right.
And I still remember how beautiful Lower Prior Lake was with the plant diversity and the clarity of the water and the fish.
Yes.
And when we got to Spring Lake, it was green, and we literally almost couldn't find any plants.
Correct.
And that is in big contrast to what we're seeing the last few years. So as a benefit of all the water quality improvements here, and I remember you said if we can get towards where we are getting close to for Spring Lake as an example, and get that plant percentage up, that it could help us in the long run with the water quality.
Exactly. What we're looking at is how do we sustain the good water clarity? I mean, alum, we can add alum, and we know that's going to be good for a year or two. How can we extend those good conditions, in the long term? And hopefully, if these native plants kick in as well, they can help then sustain on a longer term, good water quality and clarity.
And one more comment I had is, so we are working on the Southern Lake Management Plan.
Right.
And one of the things we looked at is the cattail coverage of the lake. And with the natural drawdown that we have had with the drought, we're looking at, is that going to suppress the regrowth of cattails? So when you look at the lake, which I know you do, work with our staff to clarify where are we. And an additional question I had there is, one thing is the cattail, but some of the residents that live around the lake also commented on the water lilies and how they were sort of almost invasive in the lake too.
Yes.
And I don't know if you could comment on that or not.
a lot of this has to do with water levels. Now, the cattails in the metro area are almost all hybrids. They've hybridized with the native and, you know, the broadleaf cattails and the narrowleaf. And so they're invasive. So cattails will be able to expand, but when the water is low, that's when they'll have the best expansion. If we can get some water back on Sutton, that'll not only inhibit the expansion of cattails, but also they'll start to come back a little bit. Lilies are kind of the same way. They're very common right now. They have perfect conditions for, you know, just the right depth, the mucky sediments and everything else. We put a few more feet of water on Sutton Lake, it'll settle back down to more open water, and the lilies will kind of die back because they'll drown, and hopefully the cattails will too, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions from the board? Okay, well, thank you, Steve, and good report. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to item 4.4, which is let's see, boat inspection and CD3 station. And Mr. Anderson or Mr. Nagel, you guys tag teaming? Okay. Mr. Nagel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Manager Loney. So last month, I was asked to find some more information on the CD3 stations. So let's start with a little bit of the background here. So as I mentioned last month, the Sandpoint public water access will be closed for 2 months between July and September, which could impact our boat inspections and where our inspectors will be staffed. I was also asked to look into the current AIS that are in our lakes, and the 3 that are in Pryor and Spring Lakes are Eurasian water milfoil, curly-leaf pondweed, and zebra mussels. The only AIS in Fish Lake is curly-leaf pondweed. And one other thing that we discovered in our water resource management plan is that there is a AIS prevention implementation steps, and one of them is to create or implement innovative AIS prevention steps. That step was to work with organizations to implement projects to help prevent future AIS becoming established. And I think the CD3 station would kind of promote that step in our plan. I was also asked to look into a little bit of the information regarding where boaters are coming from and where they are going. And as you can see by these couple of graphs, a lot of the boaters that are in this area recreate on areas nearby. So people from Prior Lake typically stick to boating on Prior Lake. But we do also see that there are several other lakes around and rivers as well that people are traveling from, which could potentially create issues with new aquatic invasive species coming into our lakes. In regards to the CD3 station use, there were a couple studies that I found. One was with Hennepin County Environment and Energy. They found that when no inspectors were present at the boat launches, about a quarter of all boaters actually used the CD3 stations that were present at the boat launches. And I think that's a fairly notable statistic, and it may not seem like a lot of boaters, but that's still a fair amount of use that these stations receive. Through this study, with Hennepin County. They also found that AIS violation rates decreased as the year went on. And so the recommendation that came out of this study was to promote more inspection hours and education earlier in the year to help with getting boaters kind of in a habit of removing vegetation, removing plugs before leaving the lakes. The Three Rivers Park District also had a study on the CD3 usage at 4 of their lakes, and the use kind of varied greatly between different lakes. Between 5 and 20%, 22% used these stations, 2 of which actually had greater use than the other 2, which could, they kind of determined that the layout of the boat launches kind of could have swayed how much use these stations were getting at these different launches. They also conducted through their study, they also determined how much use these get from first-time users and if they are likely to get use again next time they come out. And they found that the majority of users would actually use this equipment again. And their recommendation for getting these stations to have even more use would be to have the inspectors that are present at some of the busy times of the year to educate the boaters on how to use these stations to better remove any vegetation and remove plugs from their boats. So overall, the staff has created 4 different options on the different directions that we could take for the funding through the county as well as the tax levy funds. Staff recommends the board to vote on contracting with Waterfront Restorations for a fee of $30,500 and the purchase of 1 CD3 roadside station at the newly created Sandpoint Public Water Access. And with that, I will take any questions that you have.
Okay, I have just one quick question, and I'll open up to the rest of the board. You talk about we need a level surface for a concrete pad. Is that included in the $3,500, or is that something DNR is going to provide, or?
Yes, so the concrete pad comes with, it's incorporated in the $3,500 thing, and there's no additional materials that we would need to purchase before placing a concrete pad there. We would just need a flat surface.
$3,500, that's the complete package?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
That's
And
my
I did also look into the longevity of these stations, and they are designed to last 10 plus years, and they do come with a 1-year warranty.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I guess the motion here we'll need, if we're ready to vote, but it would be on the option 3. That's what staff's recommending. Manager Boyles.
Just out of curiosity, why 3 over 2?
So,
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I am.
yeah, so we have a budget that's designated for AIS prevention measures. So we kind of are thinking that putting the purchase of the station under that budget instead of taking funds from our capital budget reserves to kind of spend additional money on a project that would fit pretty well under our AIS budget.
course, this means that inspections are cut back by $3,500 every subsequent year. Whereas if we took the $3,500 out of undesignated, basically, it's a one-time hit. That's exactly what that kind of money should be for, in my estimation. And you keep your inspection level at the same level. Now, I could hear the argument that says, look, you're going to have less activity on the lake because the water's low, one of the biggest accesses, and go ahead, Matt.
Are you arguing?
I'm actually trying to,
Are you arguing with yourself? Is that what you're doing?
I'm for two.
I would like to make a clarification. We're not spending $3,500 every year. This is the.
No, this is a one-time cost.
So the 35, we don't have to spend $3,500 next year on
You
it.
have to add 3,500 next year to get back up the inspection amount.
Well, the question I would have, and maybe I don't know if you have the answer, but the inspection hours we're getting this year, I mean,
Yeah,
the
that's true.
Sandpoint boat launch is closed for 2 months. So are we getting equivalent amount of hours as is last year, in essence? Because we're moving those hours over to other boat launches. But I'm just trying to say, in 2023, the hours that we spent versus what we're proposing for option 3, are they about the same or less or more, or do we know? And I'll have,
So last year, I think we spent about 1,000 hours for boat inspections. And then under option 3, we would have about 925 with that budget.
Yeah.
So we are cutting it by about 100 hours, maybe a little less. But one of the launches will be closed, and I think that could kind of, those inspection hours that would have been conducted at that launch would be pushed to other launches.
yeah. Manager Tofinelli.
I would only speculate that with closing one launch, that we'll have less boats in this watershed. They won't automatically, due to parking, go to the other one at Pryor. They won't go to Spring Lake due to parking. So I would think we'll get the same percentage of inspections with less hours, would be my speculation. That and $2.50 will get you a beer at the local brew pub.
No. No, as to the latter.
Much.
So you'd be in favor of option 3?
I would go on staff's recommendation.
Okay, that's option 3,
Yes, that is correct.
right?
And part of the inspections last year, I don't think we paid for, is that correct? Is that, did DNR do a substantial amount of inspection last year? Is that correct?
Yes, so we kind of coordinated, well, our contractors coordinated with the DNR on when to staff different launches. So the DNR had a lot of hours that they were able to spend
Yep.
on
And
launches here and around the
the
metro.
majority of the DNR inspections, was that at Sandpoint, which is the one that we are closing?
I am not 100% sure. Yes.
Yeah. So, which means, when we cut on the inspection hours, it will still affect the other boat launches possibly. I'm still in favor of your recommendation, but I think it's a good resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any more comments or thoughts? Somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, the motion that staff has is to enter in a contract with Waterfront Restoration, perform boat inspections in 2024 at a cost of $30,500 and the purchase of a CD3 roadside station for the Sandpoint boat launch for $3,500, which is option 3. That's your motion?
Yeah.
Any second? Second by Manager Mortimer. Any further discussion? No more discussion? Okay, I'll assume you're all ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried
The
4-1.
good news is we all agreed that we should do this in one fashion or another.
yeah.
It's not like we've got people saying no.
And I would agree with you, Frank, is that we're going to have a boat launch shut down for 2 months. And we're still going to have good coverage, I believe, on this. Okay, Now, we're going to go to item 4.5, ferric chloride site improvements. And I think Emily is going to handle this one. Okay?
All right, as it loads on up here. So some of this material will be familiar to last month's meeting, which presented the results of the interim report recommendations from EOR on their system assessment. This is the follow-up with our staff recommendations on actions to take. So just to, again, reiterate that there's kind of two elements of this system assessment. Right now, we're in the basics. Our goal here is to maintain and replace key system elements. We want to be safe and operational. And then later this year, we'll be doing flow willing. We will be conducting some dosing and different alternative chemical analysis to allow us to assess different operation improvements to kind of tweak and optimize the system. So right now, again, we're in the basics. I made this diagram colorblind friendly for you, Manager Boyles, so I hope it worked a little better. But it expresses the same thing as last time. The completely black cell, it was a sensor that was malfunctioning that's been ordered and replaced by staff, or will be replaced when we receive it. The other elements are color-coded based on how close they are to the end of their lifetime. So the darker shade of red is approaching the end or already ended. And then the lighter shade of red, that's a regularly replacing item. So we're always evaluating that. Only one item is not nearing the end of its life cycle, and that's the feed line that goes under the road. So really looking at getting the system back up and refreshed to a comfortable and safe age. And so I'll walk through the various staff recommendations one by one, but our first recommended update is to replace aged parts. Most of the parts in the system are exceeding or close to exceeding their lifetime. We need to maintain an operational and safe system to get the benefits from our ferric chloride system. Replacing these items together also ensures that we're ordering parts that are compatible, making those decisions together, and it provides efficiency by ordering those all at once. And then some of these parts will, if approved, be replaced as part of the building redesign to make sure that we're replacing with parts that talk to each other and connect in a way that will be in line with building modifications. So the long and short there is our staff recommendation is replace aged parts. You'll see these simplifications on each of our recommendations. This table will be familiar. This is pulled from the interim report. There were kind of two alternates, alternate A and alternate B. The primary differences I've kind of shaded in darker cells. Mouse is not being very cooperative here, but you can see the big differences are related to tank. Alternate A represents one tank, where alternate B is several smaller tanks, which means that you have the cost of more radar sensors, but slightly smaller garage door. The other difference in this table is that the driveway improvement needed or recommended to be paired with these alternates is a big cost difference. So alternate A, because of a overall less volume, we could manage our deliveries through a smaller truck, requiring less driveway improvements. Alternate B, it could carry more volume, and so that would mean more driveway accommodations. Of course, we could opt to still use a smaller truck and do less driveway improvements, we would just be leaving space available in those tanks. And so that's the difference on the costs there. We'll get to recommendations on drives in the future. The box is highlighted red because it is lower in cost. Even if you were to make the driveway improvements equivalent, it would still be lower in cost. And you can see when we cost out the 10-year ongoing costs of maintaining the equipment that would be needed for each of those different tank number systems, the alternate A is still a lower cost over 10 years. And so our recommendation as staff would be to replace the tank with one 3,150 gallon tank, which would be alternate A. We think this will be an easier system to maintain, only one tank, one level sensor, less items to fail, and just more streamlined. That tank is a double-walled tank, so it essentially is self-contained within itself and does provide some spill safety there as well. However, with any tank update, to get a new tank in the building and the old tank out, we will need to alter our existing building. What is proposed is to install a garage door to just allow us to maintain the existing structure and be able to replace the tank more easily in the future. Other building updates we would recommend are sealing points where rodents are getting in, and then there is a old drain within the containment area we need to seal. So those are items we would recommend to do. And summarize, just make those necessary building upgrades. This feels pretty self-explanatory. We can't replace the tank without doing it and want to make it safe. Another piece that we would recommend is getting our safety equipment updated. We need to have certain safety equipment for a part of our permits. One example is our eye wash station. We have actually updated slightly from this system in the picture, but our eye wash system is still unheated and uninsulated, which means in March and November when it's freezing and thawing, there are periods of time where our staff is operating the system and may not have an eye wash. So that is a requirement of our permits. We would want to get an eye wash that's heated and insulated, and then PPE for staff. So we recommend updating safety equipment. And then lastly, driveway assessment. There were 4 proposed options that were developed through EOR. Ultimately, we as staff felt if we were going with this simpler one-tank system, we would use smaller trucks, making the existing driveway much more feasible to back into with a smaller truck than a big tanker truck. The pros of going with this approach is we do not have to obtain additional easements, much lower cost because we, for the majority of the project, would stay within the footprint. There would just be some slight widening and stabilizing and reinforcing around those turns to make sure we're not rutting out. That's what's happening right now. There's damage, and so we need to avoid that in the future. The cons are the other options had some safer backup or forward pull-in options, and then we would be limited to a small truck delivery with this setup. With that being said, that is what we would plan for with this tank recommendation. It would also, if in the future we found we needed those bigger trucks, we could expand upon this and do that as a second phase. We don't feel that we need to reinforce beyond this point right now. So our recommendation would be to essentially improve the existing drive. This would fall within, again, in that last table, alternate A, or if you're looking at the study, the driveway, alternate 4. So in summary, we would recommend that we replace all aged parts, replace the tank with a single 3,150 gallon tank, make necessary building upgrades, update safety equipment, and improve the existing drive. If you were to use the estimates based in the interim report, all of those tasks, design and implementation, would sum up to around $158,000. The district had budgeted just over $265,000 for ferric chloride improvements in the 2024 budget. So it would definitely fit within that based on the estimates we received in the report. Of course, when we go to design, we'll understand those costs better. So as next steps, I'll finish with our motion, but we recommend retaining a consultant for final design of the garage door building modifications and age parts replacements and driveway improvements that need design, and then ordering and replacing age equipment that does not require additional professional design services through staff immediately. Just some notes below. Any of these updates will not limit our dosing or other alternate chemical decisions. And then I know there was a flood storage project proposed for that would interact with this area, Flood Storage Project 1. If we were to move forward with that in the future, it would require some redesigning or berming. And so at this moment, we would need to make the updates as recommended to maintain existing operation and function in the interim. So in summary, just trying to find the motion here. Yeah. District staff recommends the board authorize staff to retain a consultant for ferric chloride system final design, incorporating staff recommended system enhancements, as well as staff recommends the board authorizes staff to order and replace aged ferric chloride system equipment that does not require additional professional design services. Thank you.
Okay, good report, Emily. So you're looking for two motions here.
You can incorporate it in one or do two if they're different answers.
Oh, okay, we'll see how this goes. The consultant, is that something you're going to have to go out for RFPs on, or do you have a consultant ready to go, or what's that situation?
We would likely like to retain EOR since they did the system assessment, and we feel they understand the system very well.
Okay. I'll open it up to the board members. Anybody got a question? Sure. Manager Boyles.
So the trucking firm that brings this stuff, they had a whole different recommendation. Theirs was the high price spread. Is there a circumstance under which, with this small change, we've got trucks coming in there too often, whatever the heck that means, or we can't bring sufficient, what's it called? Whatever it is, FLC.
Iron chloride.
Thank you very much. That we can't bring enough in there, and somehow we just can't treat water. I suppose in flooding conditions, perhaps that could happen, but.
Manager Boyles, I don't feel we would run into a situation where too often would occur. We would potentially increase deliveries by, a third or a half. It's about 1,000 gallon minimum difference between what a large truck can carry and what the small trucks carry. So that's the major drive here. It's going from 2 deliveries to maybe 4 annually.
Annually?
Yeah, and we should have sufficient, we can plan to have sufficient quantities of ferric chloride on site during, typical wet seasons. So, and the smaller trucks should have a little easier time traveling during that wet period, especially if there are some driveway improvements. So yeah, the downside here is additional deliveries, additional smaller deliveries for increased costs.
I had my turn, I guess.
Okay, but we'll go back to you. You have a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I forgot what it was.
Who's next?
Is there any weak spot? I mean, are we trying to save a buck? We're spending a fair amount of money here. It's an important part of the system. And is there any aspect that you think we should, and this is a staff recommendation, that we should be going, hey, just bite and add this component or renew this component?
Manager Boyles, we've gone back and forth on a number of these recommendations that we've learned about through the past several months with the EOR, their expertise, the consultants, their expertise. Emily and I have talked. We like this idea. We think it's great. And then we discussed. We looked at the pros and cons, and we said, let's go with it. And then the next meeting, we said, no, pass that one on. We like this approach. We like the single tank approach, less complexity. So we've really discussed this through and feel that the upgrades are to meet minimum, needs for long-term use and be an effective cost-effective improvement for the system.
Thank you for doing so.
Manager Morkenberg, you had your hand up.
Yes, so I think it's a good summary and good set of recommendations, and you did a good study leading up to it where we looked at different kinds of alternatives, both for driveway and tanks and so on and so on. So I think, to me, this looks very good, and considering how effective this system is, it's not that much money, so I think it's a very cost-effective solution that's very important to implement. So I very much agree with your recommendation. I just had a quick question is, when you replace the pump and the chemical feeding tubing system with valves, gauges, and so on, do you have professionals do that, or do you do it yourself?
Manager Morkenberg, the professionals will handle that, yeah.
But because it sounds like it's important it's done well, so thank you. Not that you couldn't, but.
I had a question, maybe the concern about filling the tank. Is it pretty readily, like I say, you need the tank filled? How quickly does the chemical supplier come out? Is it fairly soon, or do you have to wait a while?
Yep, President Loney, within calling the company or several to get quotes, we can usually get a delivery within 7 to 14 days.
Okay. So you can kind of gauge, okay, the tank's at this level, and we're going to go through this much. Give them a call. By that time they get there, you're filling up the tank again.
Correct. And if it does come down to, that we're going to be running low on chemical, that we can reduce dosing or volumes to extend that volume.
Makes me to another question. Are you going to have do you have to go out there every day to monitor this, or do you have electronic monitoring that tells you what the level of the tank is?
So as of tomorrow, we'll be out on site at least 3 times a week, monitoring it manually. Now, with the new equipment, we still are required to be on site at least once a week to take our water quality samples to meet our permit.
Okay.
The equipment will have the ability to have telemetry services on it, so we could add a modem and cellular capabilities, although that is not the direction we are taking at the moment. If that is of interest, that is.
No, it sounds like you have it pretty well covered by going out once a week, so that's my answer to my question. Manager Morkenberg.
Yeah, so provided that we approve the motion tonight here, do you have a time frame on how we're going to implement this? And I guess the question goes to EOR as well. Like, when are we looking at implementing these final changes?
I would anticipate that we would contract and get design done as quickly as we can this year and probably plan for construction and replacement next year if possible.
Okay. Any other questions from managers? I assume you're ready to vote, so I think we'll keep it as two motions. First motion is to authorize staff to retain a consultant for ferric chloride system final design incorporating staff recommended system enhancements. Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
So moved by Manager Boyles. Second by Manager Toffenelli. Any more discussion? Not seeing or hearing any, assume you're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second motion is motion to authorize staff to order and replace aged ferric chloride system equipment that does not require additional professional design services. So moved by Manager Toffenelli.
Second.
Second by Manager Boyles. Any more discussion? Assume you're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, staff, on that. And now we're going to go to item 4.6, and this is a motion to, we're going to talk about the alum treatment decision process, but then we're going to need a motion about conducting coring on Spring Lake during the fall of 2024. And Mr. Anderson, you have this?
Yes. So, similar to the discussions we've had beginning in January, going over, water quality, how our alum projects have responded, and then looking into a decision process on these large district alum treatment projects and how to proceed forward is really the big question. So I'm looking to answer these questions on why do we need this information, how does the guidance framework work, when do we move to the next action, so where do the decisions get made, and where do we want to focus our efforts, and what's next. I'll have a recommendation at the end. So why do we need this information? Well, the district has a growing alum reserve fund. Staff don't currently have a date or data thresholds on decision-making for these alum projects. Water quality data is showing changing conditions. We want to evaluate project effectiveness and create continuity within management planning. And we want to make informed decisions and maintain good water quality. Why is it doing that? Okay, this is a little bit of a mystery what's showing up here.
I think it's good water.
Oh, there we go. Ooh, that scared me for a second there. So, an approach was presented at the board retreat on sort of a guidance framework, a decision-making process, if you will. And staff was asked to reevaluate this. So, working with EOR and their team, we made this linear guidance on what the best approach for an alum or in-lake sediment inactivation project would look like. And this would represent a best practice. So it starts with a diagnostic study which shows evidence of internal loading. This can be a TMDL, a lake management plan. Several different plans or studies could create this or display the evidence. And then, so the plan says internal loading inactivation is necessary to meet lake management goals.
I'm thinking so.
Okay. So,
Did you pay our rent this month?
yeah. And these goals are really utilized to meet our TMDLs. So within a process, the process would, after that internal loading is deemed to be necessary, you would initiate a dosing plan. This is where Fish Lake is located. Then the first dose would be applied. You would then continue monitoring lake bottom water, and this is called the hypolimnion. After monitoring, you would continue with a follow-up with a sediment coring. The coring says how the first dose, it's a reaction of how the first dose was applied, how is it working, what would the next dose look like. So then the second dose is then applied in a multi-phase project. You would continue doing lake bottom water quality monitoring. If there's a second dose, if a second dose is anticipated or recommended, you would continue with an additional follow-up sediment coring. Apply the second dose, continue lake water quality monitoring, do a third or final sediment coring, and then you would, after that, that would let you know how the project was effective, and you would return to an adaptive lake management process. So this is a linear approach to in-lake treatments, and what we're seeing here is, and I'll go into a little more detail. Our water bodies are they're in each of the lakes that we're going to discuss here in different phases of this process. We're looking to answer the question of when do we move to the next action? And that's the difficulty here that staff are having. We don't have good direction on how to get from here to here. Now, we have plans. Plans tell us that we need to get to the next step, but we don't have that really critical push to get us there. Data analysis can tell us this, but we need to make these decisions. We want to answer, where do we want to focus? As I mentioned earlier, Fish Lake is one of our focus areas. A 2024 management plan indicates that there's possible need for internal load management. Upper Prior Lake received a 60% initial dose in 2020 as part of a multi-phase alum project. And Spring Lake has completed its 3 of 3 treatments that occurred in 2013, 2018, and 2020. We have not conducted follow-up coring. So what next? Did it work? There's a lot of questions. Our hypolimnion or lake bottom water quality monitoring indicated in January that there's questions around this. It was starting to rise. Is that of concern? All right, so to start with Fish Lake, it sounds like Emily presented on Fish Lake at the board workshop today. And if we were to zoom in on this framework, Fish Lake is at that initiate dosing plan. We have that. That was a part of the lake management plan. So the question is, what next? Well, there was a staff recommendation to hold on in-lake treatments and to continue pursuing external load management. In Upper Prior Lake, we are currently monitoring. That first and 60% dose was initiated in 2020. We have several years of water quality monitoring. How do we make a decision on what to do next? Well, if we allow water quality monitoring to drive that decision-making process, when do we do follow-up sediment coring? Well, water quality data is showing that it's doing quite well. There's a little blip at the end, but staff are recommending to hold on sediment coring and continue lake bottom water quality monitoring until there is a little more indication that there might be a problem here. Now, if board had interest in coring and learning to provide more information through coring on Upper Prior, cores can be taken and still provide several years, 5 or more. Carl might have more information. But coring now can still provide future information, so it can still be of value now. Yes,
I
Manager.
got a question. I know we have an agreement with Bowser on the alum treatment for Upper Prior. Is there anything in there that says you need to do coring at X, or is it totally up to us to decide, or? Just want to make sure we're not in violation of that agreement.
Yeah. President Loney, I'm glad you asked. I just recently reviewed our assurance agreements with Bowser. So the summary here is that if water quality does not meet 3, so if it drops below the state water quality standard for Upper Prior Lake and another water quality indicator, either chlorophyll A or clarity, then we would be required to meet those, and by that would be initiating a second
Okay.
dose.
So there are certain triggers that we have to
There are,
watch out for.
but as of now, we are pretty far from going down that direction.
Okay. Thank you.
And so finally, in Spring Lake, we've applied 3 doses. We are monitoring the bottom water quality. We have not done final sediment coring. So what's driving that decision? Just to step back here, we have realized the benefits on Spring Lake through the project and have seen the water quality improvements, but we really haven't analyzed the complete effectiveness and what the conditions of the alum are doing on the bottom of the lake. So we're seeing water quality movements in our data sets, as indicated in this upper right graph. That's the orange is what the bottom's doing. So in short, we would expect it to be staying pretty close to the bottom after a completed alum treatment. So our staff recommends a motion to approve conducting coring on Spring Lake during fall of 2024. This information would give staff and engineers information on the effectiveness of Spring Lake's alum treatment and learn what it's doing, provide us information on any future actions, and maybe future actions, because Spring Lake has pretty large implications to Upper Prior Lake's water quality. And with that, I will take any questions.
Manager Boyles.
You outlined what appears to be a 10-step process, right? I caught that at least. Do you know over what time span these steps take place, or does the timing of one step based upon the results of the previous step or some such thing?
Yeah, the Spring Lake alum treatment is on the longer side. So from an initial dose of 2013, this is my understanding. Carl would probably have quite a few more examples, but from 2013 to 2020, it's a 7-year dose for a completed plan is on the longer side. But it really depends on how the bottom phosphorus reacts and what the total dosing regimen was planned for. I'm not sure if that answered your question. But
Well, part of what I'm wondering is, this is spread out. I understand that helps us with costs, et cetera. But is it useful to have a baseline for each fish, upper, spring, all at once? We've got them here, and we can plan from them. I'm sure if it was a good idea, you would have recommended it.
Yeah, we have, considered making a plan specific to each lake. That was, there were several iterations of this framework. We wanted one that was a little more streamlined and easier for staff to explain to the board on. This is a very, I guess, I would consider it a pretty simple, I was able to explain it, but there are several, there's, the limnologist at EOR is very, very skilled and, could have added, quite a bit more information to this to make
Gotcha.
lake management planning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Manager Morkenberg.
Yeah, so Manager Boyles, I think one reason not to do all three of them at the same time now, I think one of the reasons could be that we just recently did it on Fish Lake as part of our Fish Lake management study, so we don't need to repeat that. And Upper Prior Lake, the water quality results for both upper and lower phosphorus levels is good right now. So while they are good, I think you don't need to do the boring sample. Whereas on Spring Lake, you're starting to see that the phosphorus level are starting to move in the wrong direction. But I had one question for you. On your last graph that you showed, the orange and the blue, which one is surface and which one is bottom?
Manager Morkenberg, the orange graph is the bottom in micrograms per liter. The blue is the surface water quality.
Good, thank you. So I think that's one of the reasons why, is that correct what I said here, is that's why you chose to do just Spring Lake at this point in time?
Correct.
Yep.
So we've done 3 doses on spring, as you
We-
mentioned. So does it seem like that was supposed to take care of quite a bit of this, and it didn't? That'd be a fair statement, I think. And now we're trying to see what's going on down in the bottom and see what else we can do. I mean, you're looking at how to evaluate the 3-phase alum project. That's what I'm getting out of this coring. And to see where we go next. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
Okay. Manager Tofanelli, you're on.
Well, really depending on people with more education than I can't speak for my colleagues. When I look at this, I don't see on that orange, as it drops from 2022 to 2023, what's telling me we should be coring now. So I'm really depending on someone who does this, who understands limnology, and to say, yeah, because I'm seeing this drop, and I'm saying, well, why don't we wait till 2024 and see what that number is? If it keeps dropping, are we good? If someone says, no, this is what you don't understand, well, we don't have enough time to go over what I don't understand, but it doesn't show this here. It just doesn't lead me down that path. So I'll take Carl to give me something, or staff, just a little something.
So with Spring Lake as well as Upper Prior Lake, the additional dosing, I should say the overall treatment plan, whether it's 2 doses, 3 doses, whatever, they're all trying to attempt to apply in that treatment plan enough enough alum to lock up the anticipated release from the sediments for 10 years. That's basically what the cores are, how much is coming out of the sediment and what that release rate is, so that you can set the amount of alum that you're going to try to lay down, with the goal that, okay, approximately on an annual basis, this much is going to be released over 10 years. And so it's kind of adaptive management. One snapshot in time isn't going to provide a perfect prediction of the future based on it's a dynamic system. There's things happening. There's disturbance, you know, you have carp, you have plants, you have major rainfalls that occur. With Spring Lake in particular, maybe one thing to think about with the third dose is when it was paired and kind of packaged together with Upper Prior Lake, there was, and the grant amount, there was a lot of discussion of going a little bit above and beyond with that third dose and adding more alum than the original treatment plan suggested based on the findings of the first 2 doses and the subsequent coring. So it's, I guess, a long way of saying that we think we would have expected that last dose to keep it a little bit more flat compared to the same first dose on Upper Prior. And there seems to be something where Spring Lake is reacting more quickly, or the bottom water is rebounding to a higher concentration more quickly. And I don't think we know the answer to what that is. And so the coring would then help us determine, is there a change to what's being released? Has there been a huge additional deposit on top of the last alum dose on this? Is there other influences that, if that's, the coring's not suggesting that, then we have to start thinking about other influences other than just external load becoming an internal sediment and becoming internal load, or exhaustion more quickly of that existing internal load.
Matt, are you okay with that?
I wasn't questioning the decision. I was just trying to understand the chart here and what was driving that, because I understood that orange, yellow, orange, I guess I'll call it, whatever that is color, the bottom reading was what was driving your decision to relook at that. And I don't see putting the economics in, or whether we do 1 lake or 2 all at the same time. This would dictate when a lake, what you're telling me, would dictate when it makes sense to do further analysis.
I got one follow-up question on what Matt was talking about. So we do these corings, and I know they're only good for a certain number of years until you do it alum treatment. Otherwise, you say, well, we got to do the corings again. Is that, you know, how long? If we did corings in this year, fall of 2024, how good are those corings for an alum treatment? Because you use those corings to determine the dosage. So is it a year later you should do the alum treatment, or 2 years? What I'm getting at, if we do these and we say, well, it looks good that we don't have to dose for 3 years, do we have to come back and core again?
So Jeff did mention a number of years. There's not a hard number to really put to it. It's more in terms of, is there some major influence post your coring that could change your expected release rate? And predominantly is that, has there been some major flooding event that dumped a huge load that it's not a kind of just typical precipitation year? There's something big that happened that really altered the system that could change what you would now expect to be on the bottom and what its release rate would be at the surface layers of that overall profile of 6 to 8 millimeters.
What you're saying, it depends.
Depends. I mean, I think there's pretty low risk a couple years out when you're just adapting your management plan, but even the Fish Lake management plan,
Okay.
we looked at the weather patterns, or the records since that was completed. That's much longer. I think that was on the order of 7 years ago or 8 years ago, and that just there hadn't been a major event, and it's a small watershed area. To lake area is another factor of, with professional judgment, why we'd say that for the initial dose is going to be still reliable data to base your first dose on a treatment plan.
I had a question.
Manager Morkenberg.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with Manager Toffanelli on his question, And so the question is whether this is the year to do the boring on Spring Lake. I think it's a good idea, but the question is whether it's, and one reason why I'm asking whether this year is the right one is for 2 years we have not had very much precipitation, and one of the biggest pollution factors to Spring Lake is when we have the big rainfalls, and there's a lot of influx into the lake. So the question is whether it would be wise to wait and see where does that orange curve go, like maybe wait another year and see in what direction does it go. So I would just say, tend to agree with that question.
So if I might just interject, I mean, that's another aspect of what we're seeing is the loading, external loading to the lake over the last 2 years has been arguably lower than in prior wetter years. Yet the bottom water concentration is going up, while external loading is going down for the last 2 years. So you could say the same thing about Upper Prior as well, and it makes sense. Those numbers are staying close to each other, the top and the bottom water, or the bottom water staying very low since the last. So why in the absence of normal loading, having a low loading, are you seeing a rebound quicker than you would have expected?
So-
Even with the third dose being kind of a bonus dose, it was larger than the original treatment plan had laid out, just because of trying to leverage the packaging of the two projects together and the funding available.
I think Matt's question is a good one. And you're looking at the fall of 2024 to do the coring. So you're going to do some more testing of water quality on Spring Lake before you'd actually do the coring. So if the testing came back and the water quality, let's say, dropped for whatever reason, would you still do the coring?
Manager Loney, yes, that would be, even if it held at the same concentration that we're seeing, the average concentration that we saw in 2023, it's still at the level that we feel that there's something going on. That's,
Okay.
with this, if you look back at 2014 and then the subsequent 3 years, you saw that rate climb like we did. That was only after a 50% dose. But you can also look at it as, there was not coring done prior to or after 2012 when the initial project was designed. There's several, there were the following alum treatments didn't have coring, so we still don't have a gauge on what the total effectiveness was. So that is of interest, how much phosphorus was captured from the original plan, so that we can, look at, were those calculations correct, and what, we can learn a lot about what the future reactions and future projections of what, water quality might look like in Spring Lake, even though next year water quality could be similar. But it's more than just an immediate, with sort of a bonus that we can use this coring for several years.
Okay.
It doesn't mean we have to, it doesn't mean that we're going to, push us into another project.
Okay. Manager Markenberg, you got something?
Yes, so on Spring Lake, how many coring samples would you obtain, and what kind of water levels do you obtain them?
So I'll take this. I would just recommend, at least at first, looking back to the same spatial distribution and number as the previous corings. And I don't know what that is. I wasn't involved with that. So we would have our limnologist, Ann, take a look at that and based on her other experience with other lakes, see if there's any additional recommendation. Maybe there's a couple more, maybe there's a slightly different distribution pattern, but for sure we would want to repeat most of the original coring locations and spatial distribution. But there might be some slight variation. I just don't know at this point.
Okay, well, we have been putting money away in the alum fund for this type of, for sediment coring for the future alum treatment, so anybody want to make a motion
So moved.
on conducting coring on Spring Lake? That's a motion, any seconded?
Second.
Second by Manager Tofinelli. I guess any more discussion? I don't see or hear any. Do you, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, a lot of discussion on that one. Okay, so now we're going to go to item 4.7. There's a lot of resolutions here, 3 of them. And this is Administrator Gacy is going to explain it all.
Yeah, President Loney and managers. The first of the 3 resolutions, Resolution 24-378, is really resulting from in 2024, in our budget, we included funds for seasonal interns. These interns traditionally inspected our conservation easements, but this year we are not proposing to hire interns for 2024, but rather last month we retained Scott Soil and Water Conservation District to perform our conservation easement inspection services. So this resolution is transferring $5,000 from the district's salary and benefits budget line item to the BMP and easement line item to cover Scott Soil and Water Conservation District's services related to conservation easement inspections and enforcement. Resolution 24-379, when our 2024 budget was developed, at that time, we thought that the existing funds within the Prior Lake Operations Funds were enough to cover budgeted 2024 activity, and therefore, we did not believe that the Watershed District would have to contribute funds to the PLOC operations for 2024. But based on some revised calculations earlier this year for cooperator contributions, it was determined that Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District needs to contribute approximately $39,000 to cover the district's portions of 2024 budgeted activities. So this resolution will increase the Prior Lake Outlet Channel contribution budget line item from 0 to $38,971 using implementation fund budget reserves. Finally, Resolution 24-380. So when other cooperators pay their portion of their cost share for the operating of the Prior Lake Outlet Channel, the district sends them an invoice to pay. But because the district maintains the books and the cash, how we pay our portion of the cost share is literally by doing a resolution to transfer funds from the district's implementation fund to the Prior Lake Outlet Channel Operations Fund. So the last resolution authorizes this transfer of funds between the various funds from our implementation fund to the Prior Lake Outlet funds. So therefore, staff recommends that the managers make a motion to approve Resolution 24-378, amending the 2024 budget to reclass funds from 509 implementation funds, program salaries and benefits, to 648 BMP implementation, inventory, and inspections. Also to approve Resolution 24-379, amending the 2024 budget 509 implementation fund, PLOC contribution line items. And finally, Resolution 24-380, authorizing authorization to transfer funds to the JPA MOA funds.
Okay, thank you, Manager Geesey. This is really good financial housekeeping, get our funds in order in the right place. And we did talk about the increasing the easement inspection by eliminating the interns, and the other two items really deal with the PLOC, getting that corrected. So I would just simply, somebody want to make a motion to approve Resolution 24-378?
I move to move all three resolutions.
Okay, I like that. Do we have a second to move all three? Second. Second by Manager Morkenberg. Okay, so motion's been made and seconded for approval of all three resolutions as previously mentioned.
Question.
Question?
I have just a question or point of order, I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
Since they're all three separate, if we do them all together, can I just fill the forms out like?
Well,
Okay.
it'll be the
Still
same,
three
it'll be the
different
same vote.
resolutions.
Right, it's the same.
Whatever the vote is,
Okay.
it'll be the same.
Yep,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Assume you're all ready to vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, well, we're going to move right on to the treasurer's report, I believe.
Yes, Mr. President, board members. As a rule, in general, we try to keep our cash on hand, which is not restricted or committed to more than 50%. And so Administrator Geesey has worked with our accountant to sort of plan out and look at our cash flow so we can keep track of it and see where it goes over time. In general, and what we're trying to do with the cash flow analysis is to, once we get to June, to try and do a prediction so that the cash flow analysis looks through to next June. And that way, when we get to the end of the year, it will be also more useful. In general, the expenses both for the general fund and for the implementation fund are at or below what is expected. Again, we are still early in the year, so we don't have many expenses that have come in yet. Not many of our contractors have submitted bills. One thing you can see in the implementation fund is we got a grant of $45,000, and when you look at the percentage there, you can see it's a high percentage we have for received grants. But this was based on grant received for projects completed in 2023, and we expected to get the money then, but got it this year. But that's why we see a higher amount this year. Overall, that's a good thing. You can also see in the planning and program development cost is showing up a little bit higher than it should be for 2 months. And the reason is we paid our $7,500 membership fee to the Minnesota watersheds. And overall, our financial numbers are in good standing.
Good
Any
report.
questions?
I had just one I noticed, and I don't know, on our budget sheets, which basically financial from January to February, when I look at 2024 source of funds, the levy and the budget is still 2023. Is that correct? Or should that be 2024?
Manager Loney, could you?
See, these sheets here that we have.
That is a typographical error. Thank you for catching that. We
And
will,
it's the
we'll
same
make
on
that
the other page, too.
Yep.
correct.
Thank you.
We will make those corrections. Thank you
It's
for
like
pointing that out.
Writing your first check of the year and you're still.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any other thing, any other questions on the finances? Okay, are we good? All right. Thank you, Christian, a good report. And thanks for doing all that. And next, we're on the consent agenda. This is considered one item of business. And remember, we removed 6.5 from that consent agenda. We have 6.1 meeting minutes, February 20th, board workshop, meeting minutes, February 20th board meeting, claims list, visa expenditures, bank purchase card expenditure summary, 2024 board liaison appointments revised because we did a switch between Manager Morgenberg and Manager Tofinelli. And then the water resource management plan amendments, which we discussed at the last meeting, and this is approving those discussions. So anybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Motion by, is that you, Ben?
Yeah.
Motion by Burnett. Second?
I threw my voice.
Second, I think, by Manager Tofinelli. I'm getting mixed motions here, yes, sir.
Sorry.
Okay, mixed motions, yes. Okay. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right, it's time for Mr. Manager Boyles to read our upcoming meeting and event schedule.
You know, I'm so glad you asked me to do this, and the results are pretty obvious.
Hey, there's a lot of people at
The
home.
place is empty, yes, yes. All right, upcoming items, meetings and events for the month of March. Farmer-led Council Lake Friendly Farm Award Banquet will take place Wednesday, March 20th at noon. That would be tomorrow.
That would be tomorrow.
Make sure you say that.
RSVP required. Is that what you asked me to say?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
The Community Action Committee, do I always get that wrong? CAC.
Advisory Committee.
CAC meeting is Thursday, March 28th, 6 p.m., City Hall, downstairs Wagon Bridge Conference Room. Board of Managers Workshop will be Tuesday, April 16th, 4 p.m., as usual, in the Parkview Conference Room. And finally, the Board of Managers actual meeting is Tuesday, the 16th, at, 6 p.m. in this City Council chambers.
Very
That is
good.
the conclusion of the meetings.
Great job, Manager Boyles, great job.
That's all I can do.
Looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Manager Tofinelli,
Second?
second by Manager Burnett. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We're done at 8:09. Thank you.